Hey friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and I'm coming to you kind of from a strange location this week. My second son, David, is in the orthodontist right now getting his braces on, and since I had some time alone in the car, I figured I would go ahead and shoot my video for this week while I was waiting for him, because I just kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit this week. And this was a good time. I don't have any of the other children with me, so it's quiet, and it is rare to find quiet moments when I'm home in the house. So excuse the weird location and me being in the car, but we're just doing what works this week, and it kind of relates to my topic that I'll get to in a minute. First, let me kind of catch you up to speed on what's been happening around our house this week. We started out last week literally right after I published my video for last week. The two new calves that we had gotten on our homestead, these are calves that we're raising for meat. They will be probably processed in the beginning of 2024. Suddenly the little steer just died out of nowhere. There were no symptoms and no signs. It was extremely tragic and sad. And it happened right after a storm, so we were kind of like, was it sickness, or did he get struck by lightning? Because that's common to happen in cattle that are out on a pasture. So we had no idea what had happened, but we just went out after the storm and we found him. So we were very concerned. We had to bury him. The kids were heartsick. And then the next morning, the little heifer calf was showing signs of sickness. So at that point we realized that it wasn't the storm. The other one was likely sick too and just was weaker and died before it showed a struggle. So we spent all day on Sunday trying to save this little heifer calf, and we did everything we could, antibiotics, just trying to get fluids in her, electrolytes. We had another storm that day, which it was just awful, kind of an awful experience. And through the night, early in Monday morning, she also passed away. So then we spent all day Monday. Adam had to go back to work, so the boys and I spent that time trying to bury this little heifer calf, and we finally got it done. It took us 3 hours of shoveling and a lot of work, and it was just a really tragic way to start the week. And we've kind of figured out that it was shipping fever that happens to otherwise healthy calves. They get stressed in the transition to a new home and through the process of getting acclimated to a new herd, and we think that the calves then are susceptible to a bacteria that causes them to develop pneumonia. And so that was how we started out the week. And it was kind of unfortunate because this was the week that we were really getting back to school. You know, July was supposed to be a heavy school month for us, and it seemed like every Monday when we would start back, something would happen to knock us off course. In the beginning of the month, many of you know I lost my grandmother, and so that we lost a whole week of school, obviously, in preparing for her funeral and grieving and all of that. And then it seems like, you know, every Monday since something come up, and this week was no exception. So Monday, you know, was kind of lost with how much work we had to do in handling the calves. And so Tuesday we tried to get back into it, and it's just felt like catching up ever since. And so it relates, I'm not just rambling. This relates to the topic that I wanted to share with you this week, because every week I get a handful, at least a dozen comments from typically young mothers, but sometimes, you know, mothers in my season of life, sometimes even older women that see me share what I share on social media, and their biggest question is, how do I do it? How do I manage everything that I have going on? Because if you're new here, just to kind of share a little bit about myself, I am a mother of 7. I'm pregnant with my 8th a baby, and Lord willing, we will welcome that baby into our family in December. So the children alone are obviously a full-time job. They keep me very busy. On top of that, we do homeschool, so I'm in charge of my kids' educations. We also have a small homestead that obviously I'm sharing about you. We grow a lot of our own meat. We grow our beef, our poultry, our eggs. We manage a garden. I do a lot of food preservation. Just a lot going on the homestead front. And then on top of that, I'm a wife and a human being, so I have relationships to maintain, I have a home to manage, And then I also have a social media business, I guess, that I'm doing here between my YouTube channel and everything that I'm sharing on my Instagram account. So I wear a lot of hats. And so the common question I get is, how do I wear all those hats? How do I keep all of those balls in the air? What is my secret? And so, spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about this in the video, but I want to tell you that I don't keep all the balls in the air. Nobody does. They're lying to you if they say they're doing everything perfectly well all the time. Nobody can do it all. But in this video, I want to answer the question because I get it so commonly, so frequently, and I thought it would be nice to kind of put all my thoughts together in one video so that I can point people to this when I get that question so frequently. So in this video, I'm going to discuss 10 tips, 10 things that work for me to try to keep all the balls in the air, to try to get it all done. And as I mentioned, I do not. I fail every week. There's something every week that I have to let go and let slip by because it is impossible to do it all. But these are the things that help me try to do as much as I possibly can. So hopefully you can glean something through this. Remember, this is just what works for me. It might not work for you. Take what will work for you, forget the rest, but we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to share these 10 tips or ideas with you. Okay, so my first tip, if you followed me for any length of time, either here on Instagram, you know that I'm a big fan of my planner. I have a whole video outlining how I use my planner here, and I will link that video in the description, but I do use an Erin Condren teacher planner. And it took me many years to figure out which planner would work best for me, my personality, my lifestyle, and I finally found one that worked for me. What works for me will not work for you because all of our brains are set up differently. Some people like a digital planner, some people like a paper planner, some people want a daily planner, some people want a weekly planner. There are all these options out there. And it took me years of trying different things to figure out something that finally worked for me. So I will link that video that will show you my description, but that is my first tip for you, is you need to have a plan. If you're a busy person, it is nearly impossible to keep track of everything in your mind. You're gonna forget things are gonna slip by, and it's just best to have a spot to write everything out, get it all out of your head and on paper, and for me that really helps my mental state. It's frazzled if it's up in here, but if I spend one day a week, and I typically sit down on Sunday evenings and I plan out the rest of the week, and just getting it outlined and organized on a sheet of paper and out of my head helps me start that week out kind of less frazzled and in an organized place. It's like, okay, I have a plan, I know what I'm gonna do, and there's less anxiety and craziness and chaos going on in my mind. But I also need to remember that different seasons require a different amount of planning and organization. There are times of my life, such as like the postpartum experience, or even recently in the first trimester, where the planner began to work against me, because I would sit down and make my plan, but then every day would be so unpredictable. I might not feel well enough to do what was on my plan. And so the planner then, I felt like a slave to it, like I'm just trying to accomplish what I had on the plan, or I would fail to accomplish what I had on the plan, and it would affect me mentally. I would feel like a failure by the end of the day. I'm not doing anything. I'm letting all the balls drop. And so you have to recognize that there are times and seasons of your life where having a plan may actually be a disservice to you. So you need to discern and recognize when you need it and when it's going to be a burden or a hassle. And so for most of my life, when things are going normal, I'm feeling well, I don't have a newborn baby that is unpredictable in terms of their schedule and routine, having a plan is necessary for me. Otherwise, it's time to set the planner aside and just go with the flow. So that's my first tip. Get a planner, find one that works for you. All right, so my second tip for kind of getting it all done is to kind of compartmentalize your work. I mentioned in the beginning of this video, and I think I've done a video on this topic before at length, but I'll just kind of go over it right now. I compartmentalize my life into the areas sort of that I mentioned earlier. You know, I have homeschool work with the children is one area of my life. The homestead work and chores are another area of my life. The work that I need to do on social media is one area of my life. Housework is another area. I definitely have compartmentalized the chores and the things that I need to get done every day. And I recognize that I can't do everything in every area of my life all the time. So it reminds me of when my son Gabriel was little. He had so many food allergies and we were having a hard time. We were worrying that he wasn't getting enough nutrients. So I took him to a pediatric nutritionist and we went over everything, and she was telling me, you know, what I needed to do to get everything in him that he needed, which was quite a challenge because he had a list of like 8 allergens. But anyways, she told me something that kind of stuck with me. She said the goal isn't to have every day be perfect where you hit all of these food groups. The goal is to look at it over the course of a week, you know, and did he get all the nutrients he needed over the course of a week and not in a specific day? And I feel like as a stay-at-home mom, as a mother, as a homeschooling mother, I have to look at my work that way. I will very rarely hit everything in all those little boxes, all those little compartments every day. It's impossible to do. But I need to look at my work over the course of a week and see if I'm completing it, you know, in a week or in a month or in a season, however you need to compartmentalize your life. So for example, you know, there might be a day where the weather is really nice and you just need to capitalize on that and get outside and get as much homestead work done as you possibly can. We had a day like that yesterday. I just had to catch up on garden work. Everything else got set aside. We didn't get schoolwork done. Meals were very simple. I got no housework done apart from a couple loads of laundry, and that was okay because I knocked a lot of my list of the outdoor homestead work off. The next day, you know, you might have a rainy day where you can't get outside and work. So that's the day to really knock off your list of, you know, get a lot of quality homeschool lessons in. Make sure, you know, the housework is caught up. You just compartmentalize your life. You take each day as it comes and you figure out what you can get done. You're never going to accomplish everything in every area of your life every single day. And maybe not even in every season. You know, there might be seasons of your life during the growing season or during the harvest season where the homestead work has to be priority. Or if you're not a homesteader, it could be a season of your life where your kids are extremely demanding. They're going through a clingy phase. They're not sleeping well at night. You may be potty training, and the kids need a lot more of your attention, and you just have to let some of the housework go. And that's okay. You know, you just find your pockets of time during the week, look at your work over the course of the week, and see how well it's getting done, and that's going to be okay. My friend Kate from Venison from Dinner, she has a saying. She talks about keeping all of the balls in the air. You know, she's a busy mom like me. She has a lot of balls she has to keep in the air. It's like a juggling act. And she mentions that the goal in life is to figure out which balls will bounce and which balls will break if they drop. And so that's what you do every day. You look at your list of what you need to get done. If I drop this ball today, will it bounce and I can pick it back up tomorrow? Or if I drop this ball today, is it going to break and we're going to have a serious problem? So figure out what you can do in each of your little compartments, get it done, and you have to let the rest go. This third tip really ties into that, but it's just you have to prioritize for the season. And as I mentioned, you know, certain seasons, especially on a homestead, are going to require a lot more work than others. Winter is our time to really come kind of inside, focus on projects that maybe we couldn't get to inside the house during the busy season of work outside of the house, really focus on school with the kids, all of those kinds of things. But every season, based on the weather, it's going to determine the work that we do, but also the seasons of life that you have. You know, I'm finding that life is changing a lot now with teenagers. The amount of work that I can get done is very different now with teenage helpers versus how it was when I didn't have them. And so you just kind of have to roll with it. And every season that you're in, whether it's literal seasons of the year or seasons of life, you just have to prioritize and figure out what needs your attention during that season. And some things you just have to let go during certain seasons. And that's okay to do. You can't do it all the time. Give yourself some grace. All right, my fourth tip is to make sure you delegate things. Make sure you know when to ask for help and to get that help. So Delegation may look like sitting down with your husband and figuring out, what each of you are going to be responsible for. And I'm not just talking about, housework. A lot of times when you get married, you sit down beforehand and you're like, okay, you're going to work and I'm going to stay home and take care of the house and the kids. I'm not even talking on that level, but when it comes to homeschooling, if you're in a season of life where you're overwhelmed with the homeschooling work, maybe sit down and talk to your husband and be like, I know, like my husband in particular has a strength in teaching anatomy and science because he has a background as a physical therapist. And so if I'm overwhelmed and we have those kinds of classes, my husband can take over for me. Or maybe it's a season of life where you have a nursing baby and they're requiring a lot of your energy and you just need to ask one of your older children if they could handle a couple meals, write out a plan where each one of your children takes a lunch during the week and helps you out. But you have to delegate. Any good manager, and as a mother, that's what you are. You're the manager of your home. The manager isn't doing everything in a business. They're delegating jobs out to people that they think can handle that work. And so that's what you have to do with your children. And even outside of your children or outside of your husband, there may be seasons of life where you need to get outside help. And that's okay. There was a time in my life where I thought I should be able to do it all. And there was sort of a pride issue in if I ask for help outside of my family, like I'm a failure and I'm not able to do it all. And this was in terms of housework. This was actually recently in the last year, a lot during the first trimester of pregnancy. I was struggling and the housework just wasn't getting done. And my children were handling meals. They were handling a lot of babysitting the little kids for me. They were handling all of the outdoor chores. So it felt unfair for me to also burden them with, hey, can you do the housework for me too? Because there were days I couldn't get off the couch. And so for that short season of time, I hired someone to come in once a week and do some deep cleaning just in my kitchen and the bathrooms, just to keep it from completely falling apart. And it was another stay-at-home mom who could use the money, and it worked out great. And it's okay to delegate and ask for help during those seasons. And once I started feeling better, I didn't need the help anymore. And now we don't need it. And I'm not opposed to, when I have the baby, asking for some help again. There's nothing wrong. You're not a failure. We all need help. We used to live in these villages where we had extended families living with us and there was a lot of help. Now we're kind of these islands living out here all on our own, trying to do it all on our own. If you're homeschooling, you're not outsourcing your kids' education. If you're homesteading, you're not outsourcing the growing of your food. If you cook a lot of meals from scratch, you're not outsourcing your cooking. It's okay to maybe outsource your housekeeping, or it's okay to outsource your kids' education if you can't do it. We all have to look at what we're able to accomplish in a day. We can't do it all. Delegate what you can't do. Okay. This tip is kind of life-changing for me, but also really hard to keep up with, and that is to use my evenings well. Sometimes by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I'm busy, I do a lot, and by the time Adam gets home from work, I'm kind of off duty, and there are days where I just, want to do the minimum amount of chores that I need to do to get by, and then I'm crashing. But it makes the next day that much harder, and you get into the cycle of really, really hard work crashing at the end of the day. But if you can just get the motivation to start using your evenings wisely, it will make the next day easier, and you can get out of that cycle and get into something more manageable. It just takes a couple weeks to get into a new habit. So I try to get into the habit when I get into this cycle of exhaustion in the evenings, get into the habit of using my evenings wisely. And that could mean for me taking some time in the evening to bake whatever we're going to have for breakfast the next day, to make my morning easier, taking some time to do the dishes and clean the kitchen so I can start the day with that fresh, and it's one less chore I have to do in the morning, taking the time to sit down, grade the homeschool work from the day, organize the curriculum and the lesson plans for the next day so that the day will go more smoothly. Just whatever. Sometimes it's taking time to go out in the garden and get some weeding and things done that I may not be able to get done during the next day. But if I use my evening time wisely when I have Adam home to help, it makes the next day go more smoothly, and then I'm less exhausted the next day, more able to do a little more work that evening, and in the end I get out of that cycle of just like crashing at the end of the day. So that's another tip for you. If you're struggling to get it all done, maybe you just need to use your evenings more wisely. And trust me, I know how hard it is to do when you're tired, but it only takes a couple weeks to create these new habits, and you will get out of that rut of just not having so much energy. All right, the fifth tip is to remember to keep it simple. I think that sometimes we feel like we're struggling and we can't get it all done, and it's because we've complicated things. The first thing my mind goes to is meals. You know, in order to get home-cooked meals on the table every day, you guys have seen my really easy pantry meals that I do here, and some people call them boring or easy or whatever, but it's simple. It's what I can accomplish, and I'm getting home-cooked whole foods into my kids. It doesn't need to be fancy. So I just pick a protein source, I pick a veggie, I pick a starch, and it'll fill bellies. That's what I say. If I were trying to do fancy new recipes every day that are really complicated, I wouldn't have time to get those meals on the table, and it would make the rest of my day stressful. So there is a time for the fun, fancy recipes. Generally in the winter, I have more time to devote to trying new things or taking a little more time to cook. But when it comes to the busy seasons of life, we just need to keep it as simple as possible. And the same thing goes with your homeschooling. You know, sometimes it's easy to look on social media and you see people that are doing all of these fancy things. They're doing morning baskets and poetry tea time and nature journaling and all of this stuff that looks so fun to do. But when you sit down and try to implement it in your life, it causes all of this stress, and it makes things more complicated than they need to be. So for me to get the homeschooling done with everything else I have going on, I have to keep it as simple as possible. You know, we focus on the basics, the reading and writing and arithmetic, and we are, you know, much more laid back about the other stuff. If we get to the poetry tea time, great. If we get to the nature journaling, that's wonderful. But I'm not going to sit down and have to get those things done every day in order to feel like a successful homeschool mom, because I just wouldn't be able to do it, and I would feel like a failure constantly. As simple as possible. And it's the same with your home. Set your home up in a way where things are less complicated. Get things organized so that doing your chores are simple. Set up a chore system for your kids that helps to make the work simple. You just have to simplify things, or else it just won't get done. This next tip goes right along with that. It sort of goes along with what I was saying about homeschooling and having all of these complicated things to do, but you have to set realistic goals for your life. That's my next tip. Make sure that the workload that you're giving yourself is realistic. If you wear a lot of hats like I do, it's really easy to get in over your head. You can't do it all. You know, people say, oh, you can do it all. You can work, and you can cook all of the meals from scratch, and you can have a busy homestead, and you can have 7 children, and you can homeschool them. And obviously I'm doing those things. I'm not working full time, but I do have essentially a part-time job with what I do on social media. I just have the blessing to do it from home, but I can't do all of those things well or give all of those things 100% of my attention all the time. I have to be realistic with what I can do. And so it's just like what I said about keeping it simple. I have to have realistic goals for my homeschooling with my children. I have to have realistic goals for what my home's going to look like. You know, my home isn't going to look like something out of a magazine, because I can't keep up with that. I focus on what is important to me. I want to have sanitary bathrooms and kitchens. I want things to be picked up. But it's going to look like 7 kids are homeschooled in my house 24/7 and that we homestead. It's not going to look like something out of a magazine. That's a realistic expectation that I have in my mind. If I set an unrealistic expectation for what my home would look like, I would constantly be feeling like a failure. And I think some of that comes with time, being a mother. I think when I started out, when I got married and I started having kids, I had maybe stricter standards for what I wanted my home to look like, or what my days were going to look like with my kids. But as time goes on, you just realize you can't keep up with that. And it's not so much that your standards slip. It's just that your standards become a little more realistic for what is possible for you in the season of life that you're in. So sit down, have a gut check, and just ask yourself, is what I'm asking of myself every day realistic, or am I setting myself up for failure? All right, this next one is difficult. I myself fall into this trap, but limiting distractions during the day is really important if you're busy and you're struggling to get things done. And we all know this, but implementing it is definitely difficult because it means we have to change habits. And sometimes it's the cell phone that's the distraction. You know, sometimes I go to post some stories on Instagram and I get sucked in, and all of a sudden I've lost 30 minutes of time that could have been getting something on my to-do list done. So the cell phone is a distraction, whether that is getting sucked into social media, or whether that is texting or calling friends. It could be whatever. So make sure that you're limiting your use of that. I know, easier said than done, right? Other distractions, it could be as easy as people stopping by during the day and throwing you off routine. And you know, as Christians, we want to be hospitable. I want to have my home open to others and to be welcoming of them. But I think part of it is setting boundaries with people. There was a time in my life where people didn't understand that I'm homeschooling during the day. My children need to get their homeschool work done. And so if you stop by in the middle of the day and want to visit with me for a couple of hours, it's taking away from my children and what I need to do, and it's going to push that time that I need with them into the evenings or make another day more stressful for me. And so I never wanted to say, you can't come visit at all. But it was just being clear with other people about, you know, I really love when you come and visit, but if you could maybe avoid the times of 10 to 2, because those are times that my children really need me for their homeschooling, I would really appreciate it. Or just letting people know, hey, I really want to talk to you on the phone, but during the hours of 10 to 2, I'm just not available because I need to be present for my children while I'm working on their homeschool lessons. Whatever it is for you, you just have to find a way to limit your distractions, and that often means setting boundaries for yourself in terms of like usage of your phone and things, and setting boundaries with others that will allow you to get your work done without having other people take away from what you need to get done. So that's really important, but it's also really hard to do. So I understand that. Okay. My 9th tip is kind of goes along with the first one of planning, but you know, always have a running to-do list in your mind. And we've talked about prioritizing things on the list, and you know, we all know to do that now, but it goes back to when you start looking at your to-do list, and if you feel overwhelmed and you're like, oh my goodness, there's so much that I need to get done. And some of us then just kind of freeze and we're like, okay, I'm not going to get it all done, so I'm not going to do anything. I don't know if you've ever been there before. I've been there before, where I just look at the scope of everything that I need to do and I'm just like, I can't accomplish it, so I'm just not even going to try. But that mindset isn't going to get you anywhere and isn't going to help you. So look at your list of what you have to do, and it's like the saying they say, you know, how do you eat an elephant? You do it one bite at a time. And so you just have to look at your list, you do the next thing. You do your work, you cross it off, and then you do the next thing. And by the end of the day, you look at your list, and maybe you didn't get it all done, but that's fine, but you accomplished something, and you're one step closer to getting it all done. And so that's kind of the attitude that you have to have. So just do the next thing. All right, guys, and my final tip, I would say, for getting stuff done is to be flexible. And this is also something I mentioned before, that the longer you are parenting, or that you're married, or that you're a housewife, or that you're homeschooling, you kind of learn this through trial and error, by making mistakes and just trying again. But you have to be flexible. You know, I talked about standards lowering over time, And, you know, I didn't want that to happen. I wanted my home to look a certain way, but I had to be flexible and recognize that in the season of life where I have lots of little children and I have children in my house 24/7 without a break, it's going to look like children live there. And I have to be flexible and be okay with that. There will be a season again one day where all my children are older and my house will look perfectly put together again, but this is not that season. You have to be flexible with your time. And as much as I like to stick to a daily flow and a rhythm, I have to recognize that life isn't neat and perfect, and things are always going to happen. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, calves are going to die, and they're going to take you away from what you needed to do that day. Family members can need you, and children can get sick, and you could be sick. Whatever can happen, and you just have to be flexible and not let that discourage you. You pick up your list, you do what you can, you delegate what you can't. All of the tips that I said in this video, it all kind of to sum up, you have to be flexible in order to get it all done. Okay guys, so once again, I want to say that, you know, I'm definitely not perfect. I struggle just as much as anyone else, and I never want to pretend on here that I am perfect. I get these messages from people that are like, how do you do it all? And I don't, and I never want to pretend like I do. I'm sharing with you my highlights. I'm sharing with you the things that I do get done. What I don't show are the messes in my house, or the meals I burned, or the homeschool lessons that didn't get taught, or the many failures that I have every day. So never compare yourself to what people are doing on social media and feel like you don't measure up. People are sharing their highlight reel. It isn't reality. If I took you through all of my failures in a day, you would see that I'm just like any other mom. I'm just trying my best to roll with the punches and do what I can. And hopefully, as I mentioned, you're letting the balls drop that don't break. That those balls will just bounce, you pick them back up, and you keep on juggling them and try better the next day. That's all we can do. So I hope this was an encouragement to you. I hope that, you know, the many hats that you wear, that you can just find a way to wear them with joy, because ultimately, you know, that is the goal. We are to work, we are to serve others, we're supposed to work diligently and do our jobs to the best of our ability, but most importantly, we're supposed to do them with a cheerful heart. And so that's the goal of it all. You just get what you've done, be a good model to your children, being a cheerful worker, and that's all God asks of us. So alright guys, that's all I have for this week. Next week, we are going to dive right into the Every Bit Counts challenge. That's my food preservation challenge that I do every August. If you want to learn more about that, I'll link the video in the description. That was last week's video explaining how that's going to work. And it's going to be a really fun month, the month of August. I have a lot of preservation projects planned. Wow, that's a lot of P's. Preservation projects planned that I want to share with you. And hopefully you guys will enjoy that. Lots of canning, lots of, you know, freeze drying, dehydrating, fermenting, all of the fun stuff in the kitchen. And that will be every week's video for the month of August. So, all right, guys, I am still waiting on David to get done getting his braces on. This is this is exactly what I was talking about. It was me being flexible and doing a video when I could fit it in this week here with you guys. So hopefully it was okay that I'm shooting it here in my car, and hopefully this video was a blessing to you. All right, guys, I will see you next week. Until then, have a great week. Bye.